Greetings and salutations, fellow book readers. This is Mark, and the book I will review today is Death in Venice and Other Tales. Before we continue, this is personalized limited edition of Death in Venice and Other Tales with leather cover designed and made by me. At the end of the video, I will tell you a couple of ways of how you can get one for yourself, if you are interested. Now let's get back to the review. Death in Venice and Other Tales is a collection of short stories written by Thomas Mann, who is considered one of the greatest German writers. Mann was born in Lübeck on the German Baltic coast, and there are many romantic references to the Baltic Sea in his writings, maybe similar to the way Greeks see the Aegean. He came from a family of writers. His mother, older brother, and 3 of his children were accomplished authors. Mann left Germany when Hitler came to power. His departure might have been partly influenced by his wife being Jewish and also by being an active anti-Nazi. I think Mann saw himself as a European, similar to Goethe, Schopenhauer, and Nietzsche, and despised the German nationalism. But he was bothered by the collective punishment inflicted on Germany and on many people who were innocent after the war. But that's the case with any war. It is always the innocent who pay for it. Mann's best-known work is The Magic Mountain, and I also consider it his greatest novel. It seems to contain many elements from his short stories, and it was based on his and his wife's stay in a sanatorium in Davos, Switzerland. I think Mann was also a favorite writer and influence on the famous and controversial Japanese writer Yuko Mishima, and some of it can be seen in Mishima's novels. What is Death in Venice and Other Tales about? The common theme that links all the stories is loneliness and the suffering it brings, especially its effects on an individual with sensitive artistic nature, the creator. There also is love and desire, often homosexual, and the additional difficulty it creates, and the painful and hopeless struggle against it. A lot of it, if not all, is related to and represents man's own inner psychological anguish, misery, and loneliness. The observations and encounters of a loner who seldom speaks are both more nebulous and more penetrating than those of a gregarious man. His thoughts are more intense, more peculiar, and never without a touch of sadness. Images and perceptions, which might easily be brushed aside with a glance, a laugh, an exchange of opinions, occupy his mind unduly. They are deeper in silence, take on significance, become experience, adventure, emotion. Solitude ripens originality in us, bold and disconcerting beauty, poetry. But solitude also ripens the perverse, the asymmetrical, the absurd, the forbidden. A bit of the plot. The book is a collection of stories with Death in Venice as its main feature and anchor, and because of it, it was intelligently placed at the end. I will talk a bit about the other stories in order they are printed, and then focus on Death in Venice. The first story is titled The Will for Happiness, and it is about the will to happiness transformed against physical odds into will to live. It is a narration by a former classmate about a young man whose struggle is against loneliness, and who sees happiness as an antidote for it, and sets it as his ultimate goal and a tangible point to be achieved. Little Herr Friedman is about superficially accepting your situation or position in life, and then being shown how fragile our conscious decisions are when the suppressed feelings and needs are awakened by an outside event out of our control, and the tragic consequences it can have on our lives. Tobias Mandernickel is about the hidden hate of the world and everything in it, An old man buys a dog, apparently for a companion, but it seems the dog symbolizes to him the world, and through his treatment of the animal, he shows how he feels about it. Little Lizzie is about how much we are willing to do and how far we are willing to go in order not to be alone. It is about a man who feels he has a wife he doesn't deserve, and seemingly she feels the same, and this mutual silent agreement leads to a tragic end. Gladius Day, on the surface, is about the conflict between art and religion, but to me the principal theme is intolerance and even fanaticism. It is about a young man being offended by the way a religious figure is painted and wants it destroyed. For me, the story is kind of foretelling, even anticipating future events. It was written in 1902 and it takes place in Munich, which a couple of decades later became a home base for Hitler and his ideology and a birthplace of the Nazi Party. Christian takes place in a mountain sanatorium where one of the patients, a writer named Herr Spinel, who seems to like to pronounce his name as Spinelli, probably so the Italian sound makes it more romantic and artistic. Well, Herr Spinel becomes infatuated with another patient, a young married woman named Gabrielle. He considers her as his possible muse, but he sees her potential being destroyed by her husband and infant child, who in his eyes turned her into a common woman. The story was inspired by an old Celtic myth, Tristan and Iseult, about forbidden love. It also seems that the plot, with its mountain sanatorium location, has been later expanded on by Mann into his masterpiece, The Magic Mountain. The Starvelings, a study, seems to be about desire as antidote to loneliness. I don't know, I didn't really get it, and the word starveling in the story might refer to the lack of not food but company. Tonio Kroger is a story about the need to belong created by lack of harmony between inner and outer self and the feeling of being different. I stand between two worlds. I am at home in neither, and this makes things a bit difficult for me. This story seems the most autobiographical. It conveys the impression of reflecting young Thomas Mann as much as Death in Venice does the older, mature one. The plot is about a young, exotic-looking boy and his obsessive need to try to possess the physical standard of his homeland through blonde and blue-eyed Hans and Inga. He also makes an effort to live between people like himself, but in the end gives in to his former desires. The Wunderkind is about a child prodigy, a Mozart-like genius, giving a concert and receiving longing looks from young ladies, not very different from a modern-day rock concert. Harsh Hour portrays writer's struggle while writing, the doubts about the value of the work being created, and if all the past suffering was worth the rewards received. The Blood of the Volsungs is about blood connection between family members, in this case twin brother and sister, and their somewhat abnormal, intense relationship. And the final story, Death in Venice, the cherry on the top of the cake, and that's why it was guarded for the end, to be savored as a dessert, even though it is the longest story in the collection. I don't know if it is the most personal of all the stories, but it was one written later in Mann's more mature period, and because of it, it is more complex and perplexing. The main character is Gustav von Aschenbach, a famous writer in his 50s whose wife has died at a young age. He feels overworked and decides to take a holiday in Venice, where he checks into a resort beach hotel on the island of Lido. His yearning for new and faraway places, his desire for freedom, relief, and oblivion was, as he admitted to himself, an urge to flee, an urge to get away from his work, from the everyday sight of a cold, rigid, and passionate servitude. In the hotel, he observes an assortment of international guests, focusing on a Polish family with a teenage boy. There is also a lingering feeling of coming doom. Aschenbach observes little signs of it, but people around him are unaware of or intentionally oblivious when confronted about it, until it is too late. The story deals with loneliness, which often surfaces or is recognized at the mature phase of our lives, and in Death in Venice is brought out by the presence of a young boy. There is the realization of getting old when looking at the boy, young and full of youthful energy, when playing with his friends. And boy also reminds Aschenbach of coming demise, since he is pale and anemic looking, and it seems he will live a short life. Further, the boy is surrounded by his family, and this makes Aschenbach reflect on his own loneliness, remembering his long-dead wife and married, estranged daughter, and he seems to regret not having a son. There is also an implied sexual attraction, which seems to reflect Mann's own closet homosexuality. I think, in general, Aschenbach represents Mann, his traumas, fears, desires, etc., etc., etc. He once said, when referring to Death in Venice, that nothing in the story is invented. The story is also about the relationship between two human beings, how it can exist in a vague and undefined space without any verbal communication nor confirmation. Nothing is more bizarre, more ticklish than a relationship between two people who know each other only with their eyes, who encounter, observe each other daily, even hourly, never greeting, never speaking, constrained by convention or by caprice to keep acting the indifferent strangers. They experience discomfort and overwrought curiosity, the hysteria of an unsatisfied and naturally stifled need to recognize and to exchange, and they especially feel something like a tense mutual esteem. For people love and honor someone so long as they cannot judge him, and yearning is a product of defective knowledge. What are my thoughts about Death in Venice and other tales? It is the very best of Mann's short stories, and probably some of the best of the German short fiction. There are a lot of German writings, but I see most of it being practical, dealing with philosophy and theology. Martin Luther, Leibniz, Kant, Schopenhauer, Nietzsche, Martin Heidegger, and a few others. There also might be issue with translating. I think German is a complex and practical language, and it might be easier to understand and translate pragmatic and rational ideas, as opposed to the sensual and abstract ones. This edition is translated by Joachim Nagerschol, who is considered one of the best and in general does a great job translating from German. He begins with an explanation of the challenges when translating between the two languages, not only grammatical but also the changes languages go through over time, since this is a new translation from the 1990s. German and English are related, and I can only imagine difficulties in translating from a language such as Japanese. The stories share many common elements with Mann's life. The deep loneliness he must have felt because he wasn't able to live the way he would like to, the unconsumed desires, the curse of being an artist, and yearning for normal life. Oh, to be a human being instead of an artist just once on a night like this, to flee just once the curse that states unswearingly, you cannot be, you must look, you cannot live, you must create, you cannot laugh, you must know. Oh, to live, laugh, and loud just once, and experience frank and forthright emotions. To be among you just once, be in you, you living beings. To lap you up just once in delightful sips, you bliss of normality. There's also often present in the plots the interplay between Latin and Germanic identities. Mann's mother was born in Brazil to a German father and Portuguese mother, and maybe because of it he felt a bit out of place between the Germans, and he seems to try to rectify it in his writings. In his stories there is the repeating element of admiration for blonde-haired and blue-eyed individuals. But my deepest and most fruitive love is for the blonde and blue-eyed people, the brightly living, the happy, lovable, the normal ones. To sum it up, Death in Venice and Other Tales is some of the best short fiction I have read. I like short stories because they are more focused, since there is no need to fill pages just to add volume. And Germans are probably the best when it comes to getting straight to the point. Of course, there are stories that need to be long and elaborate to clearly state its purpose. There is an excellent 1971 adaptation of Death in Venice by famous Italian director Luchino Visconti. I think it does a great job at conveying the visuals and general mood of the story, and it is beautifully acted by the main characters. Okay, let's talk about the physical book. The book I am holding is a paperback which I transform into a hardcover leather-bound edition. To make the cover, I use grade A naturally tan hide I buy from a tannery in North Spain. It is the same leather Louis Vuitton uses to make his bag, so it is top quality. I do all the processing of the leather myself. First, I designed the cover, and what I did here, I took this abstract painting of the dead wandering the deserted streets searching for victims. This is the back with the blurb, and inside the front cover I printed a quote from the book. If you would like to see a more detailed video where I explain how I transform paperback into leather hardcover, click on the link in the description. I will make a maximum of 100 editions of each title. Each one will be numbered and initialed, and the numbers will go in chronological order from 2 up, since number 1 stays with me. The price will be around $100, so if you would like me to make one for you, you can click below on my email and send me a message. I do not guarantee I will do it, since it will depend on the time I have available, access to leather, and if I can get my hands on the copy of the book. Now, if you're not willing to spend the $100 but you still want the book, what you can do is click below on the PayPal link and donate $3 or more to my channel, and for every 100 donations I will make a lottery and draw one name, and the winner will receive the book. So if you are cheap but feel lucky, this might be the way to do it. Also, your donations give me the extra motivation to make the book reviews, and I appreciate them very much, so thank you in advance. One more thing, when you make your donation, remember to include the title of the book you would like to win. The book itself is beautiful. Visually, it has a very nice texture, it smells great, and the more you handle it, the more beautiful it will become. And it makes a great gift for yourself or somebody who appreciates books. So if you want one, don't snooze, or you might lose. Well, that's it, so let's end it here, and until next time, keep your ear close to the ground and read a book. Adios.